You're listening to Daycare Overhaul, Doing Childcare Better, presented by Childcare BizHelp.
Welcome to Daycare Overhaul.
Doing childcare better.
I'm Justina Patterson.
I'm Caroline Jens.
And we're going to talk about one of our favorite topics today.
Culture.
And I am going to say we do say everything is our favorite, but I think this is especially our favorite.
We do. And I think culture is such an important thing in childcare specifically because it's a hard job. Mm-hmm. And culture really helps make the job a little better if your culture is good.
Right.
And so I think we're going to touch on today a little bit of good culture, a little bit of bad culture, and some experiences that we've had.
Let's get started.
All right. So how would you define culture?
I think that's a good question.
I know.
I think it's one of those things that's hard to define. You just know if it's good or bad.
Yeah, it's really kind of that feeling that you get when you come into work. Or the feeling that you get when you drop your child off in the morning. Yeah, culture is kind of a hard thing to define, but you know when it's not good and you know when it's bad, right?
And yeah, you know when it's good and you know when it's not good.
Well, and I think I wanted to start off today's conversation. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I wanted to start off the conversation and ask you, have you ever had a bad experience with a toxic employee that maybe made you not want to come into work at all in your past life in childcare?
Yes.
Okay, without giving names, can you give me like some details of what that experience was like?
I don't know if it was a specific person per se. But I remember many times, actually, okay, this one is a specific person. If I would drive into the parking lot and not see their car, I'm like,
that's the worst.
Oh no, they called out again. And so then like that just brings like all this anxiety, like, okay, what am I walking into? Like, I don't really want to walk into the building and that sort of thing. But otherwise, that specific example aside, just not even wanting to go into the building. Like, I don't know if I could pinpoint a specific experience or incident or anything. It just was it was
like a culmination of things, right?
Yeah, it was every little thing like building together that it's just like a disaster.
Right. It's kind of that little pet peeve that keeps like jabbing at you and then it builds up and it builds up and then you just realize that it's kind of that icky feeling.
Yeah. And, you know, you can deal with pet peeves. People have them and you're like, I have to just deal with it. But when you couple that with, you know, a bad attitude or inconsistently showing up to work or not wanting to do what they're supposed to when they get there, then you're just like, what is happening? Why is this happening? I don't want to deal with this.
Right. And that toxic employee really affects, your desire to come into work. So there's nothing worse than coming into a parking lot and not wanting to walk into the door just because you kind of, you already anticipate what the environment is going to be like.
Or you have to like, okay, I gotta talk myself into going like, it's going to be great. Like you have to talk yourself to getting out of your car and walking into the building and just trying your best to bring a positive attitude when you know you're walking into a mess.
Well, and if I were to ask you a question, what would you have wanted your center director to do at the time to make your situation better? Is there something they could have done that would have made the situation better?
So I think that this is hard because you see all these things happening and frankly, it makes you mad. And I don't know how many times I thought, why is nothing being done about this? Why are they allowed to do this? Why is this happening? And so at one point, like, yeah, you're like, you wish they would take care of it and there would be disciplinary actions or they would get called out on it. But at the same time, you don't know if anything's happening because generally your director is not going to come to you and say, just so you know, this is what I'm doing about this situation.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to fire this person, just so you know.
Like, you don't know that. So it's this thing. It's like, yes, I wish they would have done something. Were they? I don't know. But I wish I would have known, like, there was something happening. Like, there's an end in sight.
Exactly. And what we're going to get into today is ways that you can help employees like you, what you are experiencing, to maybe kind of keep them informed, to do things to where you're paying attention to them, the good employees, not those toxic people that are affecting your culture.
And I think this ties into, you feel like a lot of times those employees that are creating all this negativity are getting all the attention. So then it's like, I'm over here doing a really good job. I'm not calling in. I'm showing up time. And it's like, no one's even recognizing that. And I would say I personally am not someone that needs all that recognition all the time, but just for someone to be like, hey, I recognize you're doing a great job and I appreciate it.
Exactly.
I see it. I know it's an issue. We're working on it. And thanks for sticking in with us.
So we talked about that toxic employee. So other things that affect culture at a childcare center. So my favorite thing that I like to say, kind of that toxic employee is that bottom 20%.
Right. So
generally your organization is filled up with, it's called 20-80 or 20-60-20. Let me do my math.
Math is hard sometimes.
Math is hard sometimes. So that top 20% are your superstars, your star employees, the people that you love working with. And generally about 20% of your company is that top 20%. They're your leaders. They inspire people. They get people to want to act in a positive way. And then there's that bottom 20%. That's really your problem 20. So the bottom 20 are influencers also, just like your top 20, but they're influencing your team in the wrong direction. So whether they're complaining or they're negative, whatever, they're giving a really bad perspective. They're getting you to rally on the toxic side. So that's your bottom 20%.
Do you think that it's harder for people that are in the top 20 to get those people on board with them? Because I feel like negativity breeds negativity, and it's really easy to get pulled into that and bogged down and just fester in it. And I think it's harder for the top 20 to bring those middle 60 out of the negativity. Would you agree?
I do. And let's talk about that middle 60. So that middle 60, they're going to follow someone. Mm-hmm. So if your top 20% are not leading strong enough, they're going to follow who?
The bottom 20.
The bottom 20.
Right.
Okay. So when we're talking culture, what we need to really make sure we're doing is we're paying attention to that top 20%, because they're the people that are going to influence your culture. And if you're not keeping them inspired, if you're not keeping them motivated, if they're not heading your center in the right direction, that middle 60% are going to follow your bottom 20. And so I think your bottom 20 is really going to affect your culture. The other thing is leadership. Mm-hmm. I mean, hands down, if your leaders are not strong, what's going to happen to your culture?
And I think we talk often about it starts from the top down. So
exactly.
It starts with them.
It does. And I know we're going to get into a story later as we progress in this podcast about kind of what we experienced at our last job and how turnover switched. Well, it really started with me as a leader. And I really looked at myself and what was needed from me, what my employees needed from me. And I think we often fail to kind of ask that question of ourselves as leaders, in terms of what does my staff need me to do in order to lead them in the right direction?
You have to check in with yourself.
You do. You have to be honest with yourself. And sometimes that honesty is hard. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily like the answers you're going to get. And so we do have to be willing to kind of look at ourselves and say, hey, I need improvements in this area. I need to step it up, whatever that is. But your leadership 100% affects your culture.
Right. I think another thing that affects your culture is not having enough resources or supplies or, that's the stuff that you need to do your job.
Oh my gosh. We hear that all the time. If your teachers don't feel like you're giving them what they need in their classrooms, if they're having to go use their own money and buy supplies on their own, and yet, maybe something else is getting bought for the center instead of, meeting their needs, that's definitely going to be a negative thing on your culture, for sure. Did you ever experience that before?
Yes. And again, that's, I think, where the leadership comes into play, is being aware of that. Because I think sometimes when you're in leadership, it's really easy to not realize that's an issue. You might not realize that they need that.
Right. And often they're afraid to tell you, they're afraid to say, hey, I need these supplies over here. Don't you see I need these supplies? And so oftentimes as leaders, you have to be mind readers. Unfortunately, just like parents, you have to read the minds of your kids. And it's so true in leadership is, not your staff isn't always going to come to you and tell you what's wrong.
Right.
You probably never went to your manager and said, hey, when I drive up into the parking lot, I don't want to come in some days. Knowing your personality, you probably didn't do that.
I did not. You're right.
Right. So you probably kept that inside. So that's something as a leader, having those moments where I pull you aside and I just check in with you. Because I think if I would have pulled you aside and had a one-on-one with you and asked you for your honesty on how you feel our culture is and, do you love coming to work every day? If I would ask you that question, I would imagine you probably would have been honest.
Right. It may have taken a little bit of pulling because I don't want to like stir the pot, so to speak. But eventually I probably would have opened up and then it would have probably just been like, you probably would have been like, whoa, like this is clearly like an issue. Cause then like, it
just starts coming out all over.
Right.
Like this is everything that's gone on.
And do you think that staff that are like bored or don't feel empowered to be creative, do you think that can affect culture?
Oh my gosh, I 100% believe that because I remember in survey responses, a lot of times one of the negative things that people would say on surveys that we would do with our employees is they don't feel like they can be creative. And what happens when you're not able to be creative? You get bored. Or maybe you've been in the classroom doing the same thing every day for 2 years.
And you just need a change of pace.
Right. You just need something different.
I was just going to say, I was one of those people that filled out the surveys and said people's talents are not being utilized. Like there's all of these teachers here that have all these great things to offer and none of it's being utilized because I was one of those teachers.
I think I remember that because we actually had a gal that was really great at art, remember? And when we finally tapped into her talents, she was using cardboard. Remember that? All that leftover cardboard that we had. And she was making all these like extravagant things so that the kids could take pictures behind them for like our events that we would have. They were amazing. But imagine if we wouldn't have tapped into that side of this gal.
Right.
She never would have used her talents. She may have gotten bored and left. And I believe she's still there today, if that tells you something. So, that interest in that side of her has allowed her to bloom in the company that she's at.
Right.
Yeah. So that's really cool for sure. Boredom is definitely a culture that will affect your culture.
And I think one of the major things now affecting culture is being short-staffed.
Yeah. If you tapped into our last podcast, I believe, you would have heard we talked about, hiring superstars. But just not being able to hire employees, yeah. I think not only is it affecting the teachers in terms of being your coworkers, getting burnt out, whatever, getting tired of your schedule being changed on a day-to-day basis because there's not enough teachers. So you're having to move kids around and stuff. That it affects your leadership because they're having to interview day after day after day, look through resume after resume after resume. So they're not able to do the job they're really supposed to be doing. Your director is supposed to be doing reviews on their employees, but they can't because they're spending so much time interviewing.
Right.
So that's really affecting culture in a bad way. So yes, definitely being short-staffed. The other thing is disruptive children. And I hate to say that, but I don't know if you've ever been in a classroom where there's been several children with behavioral issues. And how many days in a row can you handle that as a teacher?
It's exhausting. It really is. It wears on you physically and mentally.
Right. And if you're not giving resources, like if the company is not helping you navigate disruptive behaviors and giving you timeouts from that or giving you additional support, bringing in a behavioral specialist, whatever it is that they can do, sometimes letting a family go. We hate to have to tell a child that they're no longer welcome at our center. But, there sometimes there becomes a point where, unfortunately, that does happen.
Right.
And it's never a good situation. So what can you do as a childcare center to offer resources to your staff to be able to handle those disruptive behaviors? Definitely.
And I think disruptive behaviors, they happen. It just, you're working with children, it happens. But knowing the leadership staff saying, I'm here for you. Like, if you need help, let me know. So knowing that you have someone in your corner to just help you out if you need it.
I need 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Give me 5 minutes to go, like, unwind.
Literally, if a teacher came to you as a director and said, you know, I'm struggling with these students, and all I need is a 5-minute break to walk down the hall, get a drink of water, go to the bathroom at this time of the day, like, that would totally change my day. Would you not do that? You'd be like, that's easy. I can do that. No problem. And that might be the difference between them staying or leaving, or the culture shifting and having them being super negative to being really positive.
I'll never forget. So this is not childcare, but I think it relates to that same thing. I worked in a gas station for many years of my life when I was going to college. And I had a really rough customer that basically made me cry at the cash register. And one of my fellow coworkers recognized that I was really affected by this customer, and they stepped in, took over the register, and said, go walk around the building. And literally just the 5 minutes that I took to walk around the building totally gave me a fresh perspective. And I was able to come back in and handle the rest of my day perfectly fine. But just sometimes asking for those 5 minutes, getting that support from your coworkers in those situations is definitely something that we need.
Because when you move your body,
you change your mind. Love that. Yeah, we were doing that right before this podcast because we were getting a little case of the gigglies before we started. So we had to move around a little to change our state. That's the next thing. Change your current state. Definitely moving around, get out of your situation, change your mental state. You know, that's going to change your culture. If you're constantly around someone that's negative, you have to get out of that state. Get away from them. But it is a lot of self-reflection because you might be the problem.
Right.
Again, that as you may not be a leader in your organization, but even as a teacher, you're leading in your position. And if you're not checking yourself personally on, are you a positive person? And it's funny, I don't have my phone near me, but in one of the books that we're reading, it says to set an alarm twice a day that says, you know, enjoy or bring joy to the moment.
Right.
And so twice a day now, the alarm on my phone will ring and I'll look at it and it says, bring joy to the moment. I'm like, I totally love this moment. You know, just having that little reminder, it changes my state. I didn't think that it would have such an impact on me, but just twice a day, having that little alarm remind me, bring joy to the moment. It will change your mindset.
I think it's because it's being intentional about what you're doing in that moment. Like, because you're there and you're present and you're like, why not be happy? Why not smile?
Exactly. All right. So if I'm a leader of a childcare center, how do I recognize that this type of negative behavior is going on in my center? How do I know that it's affecting my employees?
I think it's easy to say, how do they not know? But I think
true.
But they could not know. Sometimes you think everything is sunshine and rainbows because when staff comes to you, it is sunshine most of the time. They like to put on a front.
Right. And so that's really hard as a leader when you're asking your employees, are you good? You know, is there anything we can do for you? How are you doing? And they give you this answer. You're right.
I'm fine.
I'm fine. I'm good. You know, things are going really well. But then as soon as they walk away from you, it's a completely different story. And so I get that question all the time. Like, how do I get real answers out of my staff? Well, it's really about relationship building. So if you and I have built a relationship, if I've invested in you and I'm transparent with you about my life or my shortcomings or whatever it is about me, you're going to eventually be able to be honest with me.
Right.
You know, if you feel like it's a non-threatening environment, if you feel safe, and you feel like you can trust me, then you're gonna give some open, honest feedback.
Do you think it also matters the kind of questions and how you ask a question? I feel like if you say, how are you doing? It's easy to say, I'm fine.
Exactly.
As opposed to asking something that's more open-ended, but not as like yes or no.
You know, something like, are you feeling isolated as an employee?
That's a good one. Because I think someone would be like, they would be caught off guard that you asked them a question like that, but I think they would be more apt to respond and be like, well, actually, now that you ask the question.
Are you building friendships? Are you interacting really, are people taking you under their wing? Are they mentoring you? Are they coaching you in terms of like a new hire, asking those questions?
Yeah. How's it going? How are you today? That's not always like they're fine questions to ask, but you're not going to get the real answers as opposed to, are you feeling, welcomed by everyone? That how that can impact that.
Right. So just, it's easy to say, ask your employees how they're feeling, but coming up with, really finding out ways to ask them questions that they're going to answer honestly, and then building that relationship with them will definitely help for sure.
And asking them when you have a chance to talk. Like, I feel like it's easy to be like, oh, how are you doing today? Good. Like in passing. But if you actually want to have a realistic conversation with them, you almost need to leadership needs to schedule that time. Like, okay, I have 15 minutes. I could go have a conversation with someone right now.
Yeah. One-on-ones are so important to culture. Yeah. So asking that question, how do I recognize? Well, you have one-on-ones. You have intentional time with your staff. They're going to tell you things that you need to know.
I always, when I was in management, like to go during nap time because it's obviously more calm, but then I could go in and have an actual conversation with someone where they could sit and have a conversation with me and they didn't feel, pulled in all these different directions, because morning meeting is not a good time to go into your classroom.
Morning, it is not.
And say, hey, are you feeling okay? Is everything going well? Because it's just too busy.
Well, another way you can recognize if your culture is not healthy is, one of the first things that's an easy is, are your employees leaving? Have you looked at your retention rate? Have you really analyzed, okay, I lost 6 employees this month, and why did they leave? Not everyone's going to give you a true answer as to why they left. Consider having an exit interview by some external source. We do some exit interviews every once in a while for childcare centers. So having that outside perspective, do an exit interview for people that leave. It gives you kind of a reason as to, you can get to the root cause as to why people are leaving.
And I think they're way more likely to be more honest with you because they have left. And maybe sometimes you can ask those hard hitting questions like, okay, just be honest with me, because if you don't know, you can't fix it. Well,
and one of the things is in our leadership meetings, looking at your faces. So this is, you don't have to tell me anything, but I can tell based on your energy levels and how you look when I come into a meeting, if our culture is healthy, because you can immediately see like if someone's got stress all over them, if they're kind of backing off. You can tell that they've shut down, they've put a wall up, whatever it is. You can get a feel by the look on someone's face.
Body language.
You
may not have to speak to tell a story.
That's for sure. Another way that you can tell if your culture is healthy is, are people going the extra mile for you? You've been going the extra mile, I'll be honest, doing our new website. And you're doing that because you love the company.
Right.
Okay, so if your employees are going the extra mile for you, it means they love where they work.
And I would say specifically when you haven't asked them to.
Exactly.
Because generally, going back to the top 20, they're going to go the extra mile if you ask them to, because that's how they are. But it's the staff that do something extra just because they want to. Like out of the goodness of their heart, because they know it needs to get done.
Yeah, they're truly invested in their company and they're good people, and they see the value of the place that they work at. So yeah, they're going to go that extra mile without saying anything.
I think one of the major ones that when we were at the center we were at is if employees were having fun in the break room.
Oh my gosh.
You knew what kind of day it was based on how loud it got in there.
I love that break room. If you do not have a break room in your childcare center, I'm sorry. Do what you can to try to find a space for your staff, because it will tell you so much.
And it gives them a place to kind of rewind and relax, on their break. But it also, they can talk to their peers and form relationships with people that they might not normally work with. Generally speaking, if you have an infant teacher and a pre-K teacher, they're not going to have a lot of interaction during the day. So how are they going to get to know each other at break time?
Well, and there's nothing better than when I would come in and, our office was right next to our break room and there was a door that divided. So there would be times where the office staff would be stressed or working on billing or dealing with difficult situations, so that door would be closed. But then you would know if everything was good, the door would be open and you could hear people laughing in the break room, laughing at funny videos or sharing stories or whatever it was. And to be able, as an outsider, to walk into the center and kind of feel that positive energy is really exciting as a leader.
It's infectious.
It is infectious, and it makes me feel good. So as soon as I would sit down for a meeting with you guys and everyone else is laughing in the room next door, I kind of feel like a proud mama bear. Like I feel like the state of the culture is good.
Well, and also, like, what are they laughing about? I want to know too.
Exactly. Well, I did chime in every once in a while and jump in and
It's like, hey, what are you talking about?
yeah, take the time. Those intentional moments. Take the time, walk in and enjoy the moment with them.
And, I think most people would say they're too busy. They don't have the time. You have to make it because you can't afford to not have it.
You really have to make the time.
When we, at our center that we were at, and this is going a little bit off topic, but when we set our internal vision and you would come to the center with a bag of stuff and walk around, and anyone that could recite it got to pick anything they wanted. Like, everyone got really excited about that. Like, what did Caroline bring today?
I think you're jumping into our next topic.
Moving along.
You're transitioning too quickly.
Sorry.
But it's all good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, well, we talked about, the different things of what makes a negative culture and blah, blah, blah. And now I think we're going to dive a little bit into, our real life experience and what happened at the center that we met at. And, when I first started there, you had already worked there for many years. And I looked at what your retention rate was, and it was 45%. I mean, turnover, not retention.
So those that don't know, that is very bad.
It's very bad. So at that time in Wisconsin, turnover was about 12%. 12%.
And we were at
45.
That's a 4 and a 5. Not so good.
It was bad. So there was a lot of gossiping.
And speaking from someone that wasn't in management at the time, I can tell you it was all very negative. And this is kind of a weird thing, but everyone got along, and because everybody was being so negative. Like, they weren't getting along because everything was so positive. It was because everything was so bad.
Wow, that's a really deep perspective. That's true. There's that camaraderie that happens that kind of gathers around that negativity. That's scary. That's a scary comment. But that's really what was happening. But part of that was you were a new brand. You were a new brand. You were trying to grow. You were just starting out. And so in those types of situations, if you're starting a new childcare center, you really need strong leadership, because it can get depressing when you're not full, when you don't have enough kids, and when your classrooms aren't all full with kids and not full with teachers. And there's a lot of stress because you're still learning procedures. You're still learning who you are. And so that backbiting, I mean, that's really all you have to live for initially.
Right,
if you
but
don't
I
have the
think
leadership.
Hindsight, if we established the culture that we wanted from the beginning, it's easy to build culture around a small group of people. It gets harder the more people you add. But if it was established when we grew, it would have grown with us. And it would have been so much easier. Like, yes, you're going to have growing pains, but at least you have a clear, unified vision and culture going forward. So you know that it may not be great today, but it will be okay.
So that is a huge overhaul nugget. I'm sorry, I have to stop on that, because you hit a really good point. For those of you that, maybe a brand new center or maybe considering a childcare center, having your culture defined before you start hiring, when your staff is small enough, because once you're there, once you're established, it's a lot harder to change your culture around.
And you can say that speaking from someone that came in and had to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. So, if I were to give you a couple things of what I did to try to turn that around. So the first thing I had to do was gain credibility with my leaders, right? And so when you're going to change your culture, when you're going to make it go from a negative to a positive, you really have to gain support from your leadership, because you have to unify as a leadership in order to create change.
I think though, even before you did that, you have to know it's not going to happen overnight.
It will not happen.
You have to be in for the long haul, just to prepare yourself that I can't go in on a Monday morning and be like, this is going to be great and get everyone to buy in and expect by Friday it's going to be better.
And that's so true, because it took a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
It took a year and a half for our culture to turn around. I mean, we had baby steps, we had milestones, but I think if we were to say, like the full effects of our culture making a complete shift to something brand new, I would say it probably took about a year and a half. But that was getting, our leaders together. When I talk leaders, I mean your lead teachers too. I'm not just talking about people that are in your office. Like your lead teachers have to be on board. You have to get
the buy-in.
You have to get the buy-in
right.
from them. That is such a perfect word. And then, like you had mentioned, when I would come in to talk about our internal vision, remember we sat in a room and we wrote a vision statement that was meant for us internally as staff to follow. It was our future state. It was how we wanted our culture to be defined. I really believe that was a turning point because we believed it. We wrote the statement. We're like, this is who we're going to be.
Right. We didn't just say this is what we want. Like, let's define this. Let's put it on paper. Let's put it on the wall so everyone can see it.
We're going to be positive. We're going to be fun. We're going to grow with engagement. We're going to, so using really key words and then presenting that to the staff and getting them to buy in and understand every single word of that vision statement.
Yeah. Defining it and say, this is not just the word fun. This is what fun means to us and how we're going to live it out.
Exactly. And giving examples of it. And then obviously as leaders, you have to be a role model in that. So you have to live and model each one of those words. And then you have to recognize your staff when they're demonstrating a word. If you see fun happening, if fun is a piece of, what your internal vision is, and you see your staff laughing and having a good time, recognize that. And then, like you said, I'd bring that bag of from the dollar store of all kinds of little stupid gifts.
I'm pretty sure there was a soccer ball in there.
There was a soccer ball, maybe a rubber chicken. I don't know.
It was the most random array of stuff, but it was really exciting.
Because I would go I would just pick a random classroom and ask, what is our internal vision statement? And they would, initially everyone was kind of afraid, don't pick my room.
Yeah, because not everyone knew it fully.
And then eventually I'd have people looking out their classrooms going, come down here, pick me. So that was so cool to see how that culture, all of a sudden people were wanting me to be in their classroom so they could prove that they knew it.
But you also went in there and you said, okay, can you recite it? And it's not like if they said no, you're like, okay, I'm done. You really, really try okay, well, you really try to pull it from them to get them to select the words and gave them ample opportunity to get it right.
Yeah, it was fun. I missed that. That was really great. And then, tying it back to our performance reviews. So when we coached our staff, we tied it back to that vision and we held people accountable. So if they had disciplinary issues, they weren't following through on attendance, they weren't showing up for work, or they were gossiping, we tied it back to, hey, you're not living this part of the vision. And so always tying back performance to that vision was really a really great way to keep that culture from shifting back to the way it was.
And I think when we talk about being short-staffed, that's super stressful. And I think it's specifically that time alone that oftentimes the culture goes out the window because you're just trying to get through. But it's that time that it's the most important to make sure you're maintaining it. Because if you have a great culture, your staff is going to just buckle down and bear with you through those, days or weeks, or hopefully not too long. And they're going to get through it together, as opposed to just, if you let it go, then you're going to have to build it back up.
Yeah. So during our staffing crisis, we actually all got a lot closer. I think that's when I earned credibility with you guys, because I was answering phones. I was jumping in. I mean, we were working crazy hours, and they knew that I was literally doing everything possible to try to interview and get people in there. And we came out of that trial so much stronger as a team. And so utilize those trials.
But I think it was so impactful, though, that we still lived the culture and the vision. And you made it a point to make sure that was still happening. Because it could have easily, you could have just been like not doing it. And then we would have fallen back and had to start all over.
Consistency.
Consistency is key.
It is. Don't just try to keep implementing brand new things over and over and over again and think that that's what's going to change your center. You have to be consistent. So be choosy in what you're going to do it well, and do it consistently. Mm-hmm. And that's when you're going to see change.
Right. And then as you pick things and master them, you can add to it. Like, we're doing this great, so let's add another layer to how we're going to build culture. Maybe then we're going to add something else to it.
So one more thing on what turned our culture around, fairness. So I have to give our center director credit for that. She was amazing. And hopefully y'all will meet her soon on this podcast for kind of a reunion. But one thing that you could always say about our center director was that she was fair. Mm-hmm. And if your center director is not fair with their employees, culture will definitely be affected.
And it's not only being fair, but it's a perceived fairness. So even if they are being fair, but it's not perceived that way, then it doesn't matter.
It doesn't. Because
they're gonna think it's not fair. So it's, how can you be fair and perceive that you're also fair and show you're fair so everyone can see it?
Right. So perception, that kind of falls into our other solutions that we're going to be talking about, because when you survey your staff, which is one way to kind of keep your pulse on what your culture is like, you're surveying your staff based on their perception. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you as a leader may think certain things are going on because in your mind you believe it, you're trying to work hard at it, but the perception might be something completely different.
And the perception is more important than what you believe.
The perception is way more important because what your employees perceive is their reality. Mm-hmm. And so when you're surveying your staff, you're surveying their perception. So we have to take their answers and take it to heart, even though it may hurt sometimes. Like, I've been doing this. I've been doing all this stuff for months now.
Right.
Why aren't they seeing it? Well, obviously it needs to continue to be reinforced so that their perception changes.
And side comment, I remember having a conversation when I was in management with an employee one time, and they were like, well, that's not what I meant by that comment, or that's not what I'm like, but that's how someone perceived you. So it doesn't matter what you meant. That's how they took it. So you have to think about that. And the same goes for culture and fairness and all that stuff. It doesn't matter if that's what you meant or not. It's how it was perceived.
Right. So fairness is very important. Perception is really important. The next thing you have on here is host a funeral. So I'm going to turn that over to you. And I'm going to ask you kind of a little question about, what does hosting a funeral mean?
So I know how crazy it sounds, but at the center that we were at, were you there for this?
I don't remember being there.
So some things that happened in the culture, I would say, was not very great. Everything was very toxic. And like I said, we were all band together in this negative thing. So we had the staff meeting and it was like, it was a terrible staff meeting. I don't know if I would recommend someone doing this, but it was like everyone got to like write down their issues.
Their grievances.
And they talked about it.
Oh, wow.
And the same things kept coming over. So the person that was kind of the executive director at the time said, that's it. Everyone stand up. So everyone was like, what is happening? And she said, close your eyes. She's like, we're having a funeral. We're putting it to rest. We're going to say it's done. It's over with. We're burying it. We're not talking about it again. And so as silly as it is, it actually, everyone, then you can't complain about it anymore. Like, it's done. You have to put it to rest.
Well, especially if you go through the motions. So like if you have to write that on paper, and then maybe you go out to a garbage can and you all burn it outside or in a grill, or you tear it up, you put it in a shredder. Mm-hmm. So it's a shredding party, mm-hmm. Whatever it is. But going through those motions of getting rid of those feelings.
And sometimes all someone wants to do is write it down and get it out there. Mm-hmm. And whether or not, I would recommend leadership not read them, because it would just,
Agreed.
It'll just probably stress you out. But the fact that we sat there and we had this funeral, that's what they called it, and everyone buried what the issues were, and we had to move on. Because stewing about them and talking about them was not going to fix the problem. We had to just move past it.
Well, and I think another way to help solve some of those issues and getting your culture to turn around is having an appreciation budget. So letting your staff, empowering them with a certain budget to where they can continue to appreciate staff. So whether it's $100 a month that you give your team so they can buy whatever. So whether it's doing luncheons or potlucks or breakfast, or they bring in, flowers one day or chocolate, whatever it is, to help do some injections of positivity in the culture is something that's really easy.
Well, and going off that is we're super passionate about celebrating wins, no matter what they are, which we always believe you should do that. But even just appreciating them when you're not celebrating a win.
True.
So it's randomly for no reason except for it's Tuesday. So why not, or whatever day of the week it is.
Well, is it Taco Tuesday somewhere?
Taco Tuesday's a thing. Why not?
So to appreciate me as an employee, all I would need is tacos every day.
That's pretty easy.
I know. I'm pretty easy that way. I'm pretty easy to be appreciated.
Tacos.
All right. Sidebar. Anyways, career pathing. So when you look at culture and, that boredom that we were talking about, one way that you can kind of eliminate boredom is by helping your staff grow. I want you to grow personally and I want you to grow professionally. So what can I do as a leader in your organization, as your mentor, as your coach to help you grow in your position? Let me set a career path for you. Let me set a career path.
And I think just going back to what we've talked about previously in other podcasts is people want to know they're a part of something. So if they know they're a part of something and have a path. So just because I'm starting here does not mean I have to end here, so to speak. Like there is a goal, like I can move up, I can advance myself. It's important.
It is. It's really important. And I know we're kind of running away on time. I did want to mention, in this Profits book, Profits Childcare Success Formula, in here was the work that we did to write our internal vision statement. And so I would love to encourage people to, consider using a resource to help write an internal vision statement. We've seen it with our clients all the time that as soon as they write one of these, and if they truly believe it, they can really get their center to buy in and really see some things turn around. But culture's a tough thing.
It is.
It takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of, one thing I always like to say is, again, it starts with you. Do you have the passion? Do you believe enough in your organization to believe that your culture can be something better?
Right.
And it really starts there. And if you do believe that, rally some of your strong people alongside you and then just take baby steps. Step by step. That's all we did. But then reporting progress. So when we surveyed, if you remember, we surveyed perception and I gave all the results. And I was like, here's like the clean truth. This is what everyone said. And that was our benchmark.
Right. There's nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, there was nowhere to go. And so then 6 months later, you survey again and you can see the progress. And that's like real data. And that gets people feeling really good.
Right. That they know that things are changing and there is, it may not be, it's better than it was, but it's not perfect, but we're moving in the right direction.
Exactly. So culture is intense. There's a lot of things involved with it. We could probably talk for 2 weeks on culture.
At least 2.
But we're getting yelled at that we can't talk that long about culture because we might bore some people for sure. No, but take it to heart, culture, especially in a time when we need to retain our staff, when it's so hard to hire. The one thing that you can do, the one thing that you are in control of as a leader is your culture. It's hard to find new people, but gosh, you got to really retain the ones that you have. And your culture's depending on you to lead it. So, today's challenge is on Daycare Overhaul is to be honest with yourself. Again, rate the health of your culture, rate your performance. Look at from a 0 to 10. Is your culture rotten? Is it 0? Or is it 10? Is it like, you have a wait list of employees because your culture is just so dynamic. You've got people like knocking down the door.
Right.
How would you rate your culture from a 0 to 10? And then from that, determine some root causes as to why you're at where you're at. If you're giving yourself a 3, why are you at a 3? And then from there, you can just write an action plan with some baby steps on how to get better.
And know it will take time, but you'll get there.
Right.
It's not going to happen overnight.
It won't happen overnight. So don't be discouraged, everyone. Take your time, baby steps, find the root cause of what's going on in your culture, write a plan, take some baby steps to get better, and you can do it. But thank you guys for listening to our Daycare Overhaul podcast today. And we appreciate you so much, whether you're watching us or listening to us. And if you have a overhaul win at your center, we'd love to hear what's going on. So please share or comment in our Facebook or Instagram and hashtag overhaul win. And if you want a future topic for our podcast, we'd love
to hear what you want to hear us talk about.
Yes. So go ahead and email us at info@childcarebizhelp.com.
We'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Justina.
Thanks, Caroline.